Hello, this is Amir Kiabi with Harvey Callis Real Estate, here to give you an update in terms of what went on in Toronto's residential real estate market for the month of March. We had less transactions in March of 2024 comparing to last year. And it was mainly led by a decline in terms of number of transactions for condos. So when you look at the details, we actually had more freehold properties being sold March of this year than last year, 3% more, not significantly higher. And I'll show you later that when you look at the historical norms going back 10, 12, 13 years, the number of transactions for freehold properties is not that significant, but I think the decline was for condos. We had a lot more condos being transacted last year this time than now. This chart is showing you the number of listings that came to the market. So this year we had about 17% more freehold properties being listed. So that's significant. We also had about 22% more freehold properties being listed in February compared to last year. So the freehold market for houses is very active. It's more active on the buyer's side than it is on the seller's side. I think it's a totally different story on the condo market, and I've been saying that for the past couple of updates that the condo market, in my opinion, is getting deeper and deeper into a buyer's market, and the freehold or market is pretty much a balanced market depending on which pocket of Toronto you're looking at. Sometimes you are in a very strong seller's market for sure. Moving on, this chart is showing you the sales to listings ratios for freehold properties and condos. For freehold properties, we were at 57% sales to listings ratio, and comparing to last year, which we were at 59%. So it's slightly lower. I think it's because there are 17% more properties being offered. So it's but with the same token, there are more buyers coming to the market. So to me, that's not a significant movement on the freehold market. It is in Toronto, I would say, you're in a balanced market for freehold properties, depending on which pocket you're looking at, and a lot of times you're in a seller's market. But for condos, we were at 56% March of 2023 sales to listings ratio, and we are now at 40% for condos. That's a clear buyer's market territory. That's a huge change in my opinion, and we have been seeing that month after month. On the left side of the slide, you will see the same concept for February, and we were at 39% of sales to listings ratio for condos versus 50% last year. And later on, I'll show you a chart where I'm basically taking into account the historical norms for those ratios, and that it will be more clear. For the first week of April, we had a 74% decline for sales to listings ratios for condos compared to the same period last year, first week of April. So that trend is continuing into April. For freehold properties, we had a 62% decline for sales to listings ratio for first week of April comparing to same period last year. So I think that balance of supply and demand for freehold properties in Toronto is getting more balanced as well in favor of buyers. But by no means do I think that freehold properties in Toronto are a buyer's market. I don't think so, at least not right now. It remains to be seen how April will play out. This chart is showing you the sales to listings ratios for freehold properties in Toronto. So we had, going back 12 years, we had 1,760 properties being offered, 1,011 transactions. When you look at the historical norm going back 12 years, 1,000 transactions for freehold properties in Toronto, that's a low number. It is better than last year for sure, but I don't think the market is back to normal. And overall, as you go back and look at the normal transactions, I think this trend is true, that overall we will get less and less transactions for freehold properties as they become less affordable, in my opinion. And this chart is showing you the ratio of sales over listings, and which we were at 57.4% going back 12 years. You will see that the number was hovering, I would say prior to 2017 was hovering around 65-64%. And then after 2017, we were hovering around 55%. And I don't think that has changed that much this year versus last year. So that balance of supply and demand for freehold properties in Toronto is pretty much the same. I would say the market picked up for sure in terms of number of transactions this year than last year. Moving on, this chart is showing you the number of listings and transactions for condo properties in Toronto. And this is where things get interesting. Usually you will see those two lines move in the same direction. So if you get more listings, it will correspond with more transactions. But as you can see, this year we had about 34 condo and other type of properties being offered. But we had less transactions, 1,360. So those two lines are going the opposite way. And that to me is very significant. And we've had that for the past few months. Every time that I showed you this chart, those two lines are getting further and further apart from each other, which was not the case before. Historically, they should have been much closer. Historically, if you look at the sales to listings ratio for condos in Toronto, we were hovering around 60-70%, and a 40% sales to listings ratio is significantly low for condos, in my opinion. At least I went back 12 years. Now, this chart is showing you the average sale prices. For condos, we were up by 1% for average sales prices, and for freehold properties in Toronto, we were up by 1% as well. Average prices are not that significant in terms of concluding anything about that specific category of the market, because you also have to take into account the inflation, the specific type of a property. Next chart is showing you the MLS house price index for Toronto's for single family properties. We are showing a 1% increase comparing to last year this time. And but if I account for inflation, I think if we adjust this chart for inflation, we could say that index prices are a little bit lower than last year. Again, this is overall movement. You could say we're basically at the same level, which means that taking into account inflation, we are at lower values. But each pocket is obviously unique, so we'll have to look at each property individually. This chart is showing you the same concept for condos and townhouses. We were down by 1% year over year for townhouses and by 2% for condos in Toronto, for apartments in Toronto. Next chart is showing you the months of inventory across different categories of properties. So for Toronto as a whole, we were at 3 months of inventory by April 7th, which is pretty much the same level of inventory for a month prior to that, March 6th. And I don't think we've had a significant movement across different categories either. So for condo and other types of properties, we are at 3.8 months of inventory, slightly higher than last month. For freehold properties under $2.5 million, we are at 1.6 months of inventory. That's why I think that category is in a seller's market. So if you're in Toronto, you're selling a freehold property under $2.5 million, you are in a seller's market, specifically if you're in a semi-detached for sure. But for freehold properties above $2.5 million, we are at 5.9 months of inventory. And that to me signifies a more balanced market because those types of properties also take longer to be sold. And for detached properties, we are at 2.1 months of inventory, which is a very slight increase comparing to last year, comparing to last month. And this chart is also showing you the months of inventory for February 6th as well. So 3 months, just to give you a perspective. And lastly, I want to cover what is happening with average rents. So we are at $3,300 for freehold properties average rent, and for $2,765 for average rents for condos. I would say that for the first quarter of 2024, overall we had a decline for average rents, specifically for condos. That's it for my update for the month of March. I hope you find the information helpful. If you had any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care.